Chapter 5. Bethany hefted her purse onto her shoulder, took a deep breath to gather her courage, and entered the police station. She walked up to the reception area and requested to see Detective Colburn. It had been a couple of days since she talked to Drew, and she had been able to garner more details from the nightmare. Bethany hoped that they might help in an investigation. A few moments later, Drew came out to see her.
"Miss Searson?"
Drew extended a hand in greeting. Bethany tried to ignore the fluttering in her stomach over the simple contact from shaking his hand. "Detective Colburn, I was hoping to talk to you."
"This way."
Drew led her back to his desk. It was not the most private place, with other people going in and out, but it would do.
"What can I help you with?"
Bethany sat in the chair he provided. She had the feeling it was his chair. He sat at the edge of the desk and patiently waited while she gathered her thoughts. I remembered more. Bethany unconsciously fiddled with her purse strap, tearing away little pieces of the strap with her perfect manicured hands. "I know it's not much to go on. However, I wanted your opinion." Drew really hoped again that she was not going to be one of those crazy stalker types. When Colburn had gotten one, he had not lived it down for months. He was still the butt of a few jokes now and again. Drew made sure that his tone was gentle.
"What did you remember?"
"The voices." Bethany looked at him with utter sincerity. "I don't know who they are. They're familiar, but I cannot seem to recognize them. However, I realized that it was not the man who was trying to drown me telling me not to remember. It was the other man. He was pleading for my life. He told him that I would not remember, that I would not say anything, that I would be a good girl, that he would make certain of it. I think that's why I'm still alive."
Drew frowned. "He saved you? Whoever this guy is?"
"Yes, I'm certain of it."
"Yet you still do not remember who they are?" questioned Drew.
"No." Bethany sighed in frustration.
"What were you not to remember? What did they not want you to see?" Drew questioned her.
"I think it was drugs," she replied tentatively. Great. She was probably picking up on things that had happened the other day and weaving them into her story. It made her memories possibly unreliable and fabricated. Drew did not let that inkling of disbelief creep into his voice as he asked her, "Why do you think that?" "I thought it was icing sugar." Bethany gave sort of a half smile. "I felt so silly saying anything before now, so I have not told anyone, not even Dr. Ershman. I thought there was icing sugar on the boat. It was on the seats and the floor, just a dusting of it. I remember I had touched some with my finger and I—"
"You what?" Drew prodded gently.
"I licked it." Bethany swallowed and looked at her hands. She immediately stopped shredding the strap on her purse like she had just realized she had been doing that small action. "I licked it and I spit it out because it was not icing sugar. It tasted awful." She looked up at him with large eyes, wanting to know the truth. "It was drugs, wasn't it?"
"It could have been,"
Drew allowed. It was hard to say. They were going on the assumptions of a possible memory over 25 years ago. It could have been that someone had accidentally dropped a cleaning powder. It could all be a figment of her imagination. "I think it was." Bethany sensed that he did not necessarily believe her. "The man had pink gloves on, the kind you do dishes with. I think they spilled some sort of drug and were trying to clean it up, and I stumbled on the whole thing."
"Let's write this down."
Drew grabbed a pad and pen.
"We will put down the details. Maybe if you remember more, we can add to it. Right now, it's not enough to start an investigation."
Bethany trembled as she looked up at him. He was simply humoring her. She was certain of it. "What if I knew the name of the boat?"
"Then I might have something concrete to look into," Drew said.
"I think it was called the Sweet Bethany," she replied. Drew paused. It was too convenient in his opinion.
"Miss Searson, dreams can sometimes do funny things. Are you certain that it was the name of the boat?"
Bethany stood and adjusted her purse on her shoulder. "I know it is not the most believable story. I know you're just trying to humor me, Detective Colburn. Yet I must live with this nightmare, night after night, waking up feeling like I am drowning. Surely you can understand that I just want to understand why and who did this to me." She held her head high and made to move past him. Drew grasped her wrist gently to stop her.
I can understand that.
Bethany looked down at him, and he could see the wariness in her eyes. She was scared and was uncertain if he would help.
Please, sit down. We'll write it all out, and I will look into the boat.
Drew gestured to the chair she had just vacated.
I will try to find out if anyone owned a boat called Sweet Bethany in the area around 25 or so years ago.
You will? She asked hopefully.
I give you my word,
Drew assured her. It was the only concrete item in her story that he could track down. He would do that much. After he took her statement and gave more promises that he would investigate the boat, Drew escorted her out of the station. Colby met him on the way in.
I see your girlfriend is back, smirked Colby.
Not my girlfriend. Drew scowled at the guy. And you won't mind if I ask her out next time she comes in, Colby pressed, waiting to see Drew's reaction. Drew did not like the idea of Colby trying to charm Bethany Searson. She was a vulnerable woman who might have mental issues. He also knew that if he told Colby no, Drew would be the subject of a lot of ribbing this afternoon from the guys. Bad enough the purse picture was still making the rounds.
Suit yourself.
Colby grinned and whistled as he went back to his desk.
Hey, Colburn, where's your purse?
An officer asked as he walked by. Drew scowled. The joke was getting old, especially when at least 3 people in an hour were asking it.
Colburn, I left it at home, okay?
The frustrated outburst sounded loud in the station. Drew turned to see Green and his superior, Thames, looking at him in surprise.
What was that about?
Demanded Green.
I am sorry, sir.
Drew clenched his teeth. Wonderful, just wonderful.
It will not happen again, sir.
No kidding, Green frowned. In my office.
Yes, sir.
Drew went directly to Green's office. He waited until Green shut the door and was seated before taking a seat for himself. Any update in your case? Green asked. Drew was just glad Green was going to ignore his comment earlier.
Nothing. The only route I have left is for them to contact me. All I can do is sit and wait.
I've decided to up the ante a little. We'll say that we've found the truck, Green let him know. Mrs. Ramsley has been very cooperative and will continue to do press releases for us. Hopefully the gang would call. Drew desperately wanted them to. He was not going to get a good night's sleep until Max was out of his apartment. Even the earplugs he had bought were not cutting it. I tell you, that woman is the best thing that ever happened to me. Max sighed as he got off the phone with Paget. They had been talking for nearly an hour. It had taken 10 minutes of I love you and I miss you more junk for them to finally get off the phone. Drew was ready to throw up. He needed something masculine to happen because all this gooey love stuff was enough to make a man doubt his sanity. Drew switched on the television to the game. He grabbed 2 beers, giving one to Max, and settled on the couch.
Have you ever been in love? Asked Max.
Drew looked upward and silently asked God how long he was going to have to put up with this. No.
You are missing out.
Max sighed as he put his feet up on the coffee table.
So I've been told.
Drew did not want to have this conversation. They were not buddies. They were barely related. All Drew wanted to do was watch the game in peace. It was the best that Max could give him after having to listen to him blather on to his wife for the past hour.
It is the best,
Max insisted happily.
You don't really think so. Then one day you meet the one, and nothing is the same without her.
Drew made a non-committal sound, hoping Max would shut up.
I mean, you just see her, and it hits you. She is the one that you are going to spend the rest of your life with.
Max smiled in satisfaction.
From that moment onward, you are totally committed.
Committed was right, Drew thought darkly. To an asylum. Drew did not think it was going to be like that for him. He was far too practical and cynical to do this falling in love junk. Certainly not at first sight. Max might be naive enough for that, but not Drew. He ignored the image of Bethany Searson his mind brought forward. It was all the crazy talk that made his brain think of her, nothing more. Probably just a reminder that he promised to look up the boat name, something he had not gotten around to just yet. He ignored Max and resolutely watched the game.
I miss her,
Max said suddenly.
How can you miss her?
Drew gave Max an incredulous look. "You were on the phone with her for an hour." Max sighed. "I know. It's just not the same." Drew's cell phone rang. It was an unlisted number. "Hello?" He put it to his ear in anticipation. It could be a survey or someone wanting to clean his ducks. Drew did not care. Anything to escape the guy beside him on the couch. He could go 10 rounds with a telephone scammer right now if it got him some space from Max. "Harley, it's Sam here," answered Sam. "I'm setting up a meeting." "When and where?" asked Drew, feeling thankful. Finally, he was getting somewhere. Maybe he would be able to kick Max out of his apartment soon. "You sound a little eager." Sam hesitated. Drew lowered his voice a little in volume for effect, giving Max a dark glance. "My girlfriend is talking about love and commitment. I'd like to get away from her for a little while." Sam laughed. "Time to jump the prod." "No kidding," muttered Drew. "Lakeside docks, 2 a.m. We've got a boat to unload." Sam gave him the information. "Cole says you've been upgraded to help. A thank you for taking care of our visitor the other day." "Anything else I can do, you just let me know," promised Drew. "Will do." Sam ended the call. "Was that a call from the drug guys?" Max asked curiously. "Yes." Drew grinned. It was going to be a good day. All he had to do was set it up, and they would have the drop boat. Then Max could go home, and Drew could sleep like a regular human being again. Things were looking up. Bethany gave Martha a small smile as the housekeeper set down the last of the serving dishes for the Sunday luncheon. Bethany sat at her regular seat as her parents took their seats at the opulently set table. "How have things been going this week?" Constance asked as she laid her napkin across her lap. It was the same question every week. How have things been? Was she dating anyone? How was her therapy going? Did she think she was making any progress? Was Bethany still enjoying her position with the symphony? Did she really want to work with those children? Was she not worried she might gain a disease from them? Then would come the suggestions. "There's a lovely young man, a son of one of her father's clients. You would make such a nice couple. Or, if you drop the dance classes, you might have some time to meet someone suitable." Because all a woman was good for was getting married, Bethany thought wryly. It was not that she did not want to get married and have a family. She did. However, Bethany wanted a relationship built on love and friendship, one where she could feel like the heroine of all those silly romance novels she had a bad habit of reading. Kind of like how Drew Colburn had made her feel when he carried her down the marina walkway. Bethany tried to ignore the flutterings the memory aroused. Drew was hero material. He was hard around the edges, handsome, strong, and a man on a mission. He made her heart beat a little too fast and her mouth dry. However, Bethany had the impression he was not exactly enthused by her. Her parents would hate him. Somehow that made the idea of Drew even more attractive. Which was odd, because Bethany was not a teenager trying to rebel. She was in her 30s, for pity's sake. Then again, she had been lying like a teenager might lately. Reggie had been at her for details on who she was dating. Before she knew it, Bethany had supplied Drew's name. She had been mooning over him ever since he had carried her off that boat, so he had been on her mind when Reggie started hounding her for information about her new fellow. Making Drew her pretend boyfriend was silly and immature. Bethany regretted it instantly and resolved to pretend to dump him at the earliest opportunity. She would just have to tell Reggie that she was not interested in him. It was not going to be easy, but it was the truth. "Bethany?" Her mother gently prodded Bethany verbally to pay attention to the conversation. "I had a therapy session at the pool," Bethany informed them suddenly. She did not need another reprimand for not paying attention. Her mother tended to wax long when she was lecturing. Bethany cut up her veal cutlet into tiny pieces. "Dr. Ishman hoped that it would help trigger my memories." "I don't think that I like this new doctor of yours." Her father, Ted, frowned. "I cannot see how bringing up your childhood is going to help you." This was also a familiar theme. her father not wishing Bethany to exert herself in any way emotionally. He was worried that she might harm herself further. "I think it's working," Bethany remarked, keeping her tone as mild as possible. "I went to the marina as well. Do you know anyone who might have owned a boat called Sweet Bethany?" "We used to own a yacht called Sweet Bethany, didn't we, Ted?" Constance looked over at her husband. "That was years ago." Ted coughed and took a big swallow of water. "We sold it. There was no point in keeping it since you were afraid of the water." "I was not always afraid." Bethany wondered if she was talking about her fear of water or just in general. She lived so much of her life in a protected cocoon. Drugged and wary, always told what she had to be careful. Max Ramsley told me I used to love the water at the beach. We went to the Ramsley beach house on occasion. At least, that was what Max said. "You used to love the water," Constance replied thoughtfully. "I always wondered what happened to change that." "We agreed." Ted pointed his fork at both of them. "We agreed that you should let this go, Bethany. It will only harm you further, trying to delve into memories that may or may not exist. There are so many studies about how this could be harmful to you, to your mental health. We have worked so hard to get you to the point of where you are today, and I do not see why you would want to jeopardize that." Bethany sighed and pushed her green beans around on her plate. Her parents always treated her like she was fragile and could shatter at any moment. "I just want to know what happened. Is that really so bad?" "Sweetheart." Ted gave her a smile and spoke in a tone that made Bethany feel like she was 10 years old again. "It was years ago. Leave it alone." Bethany pressed her lips together at the admonishment. She did not know why her father gave such resistance to the idea of her recovering her childhood memories. She had learned one thing today. The boat was her father's. Something had happened on that boat. Unless it was like Drew had mentioned, that sometimes memories could get mixed up, and she had substituted the name of her father's boat because that's what her mind knew. Bethany pushed the beans around and felt confused. She would have to call Dr. Ershman and discuss it with her. "I was talking to Betty Milton, and she mentioned her son Earle needs a date for the annual spring benefit." Constance smiled resolutely, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. "The Miltons? Really?" Ted shook his head. "I was talking to Mayor Bailey the other day, and his son Trenton is looking for a good woman." "Trenton is a bit arrogant, don't you think?" Constance gave Ted a significant look. "I do not believe that he would suit our Bethany." "And the Miltons would?" Ted obviously thought they were a step down in the world. "Ted," sighed Constance, "we are running out of eligible gentlemen. Earle is a very nice man. He would treat our Bethany well." Bethany ate a green bean. They would go on debating the merits of whom to invite to date Bethany. Her mother would probably win. Bethany had never met Earle Milton, but if the grasping Betty Milton was anything to go by, the date was not going to go well. Bethany did not like green beans, she reflected. She ate them because it was expected of her. So many things were expected of her, and she went along with them, compliant and allowing things to happen just because her parents wished it. Part of Bethany knew it was the medication she had been on. Part of it was how she had been raised, like she could not make any but the most basic decisions for herself, that anything else would be too taxing for her. She wondered what her parents might say about Drew Colburn. They would quickly dismiss him out of hand over his profession and status in life. Bethany frowned. "I met a police officer. A detective, actually." Ted and Constance stopped talking and looked at her with interest. Not good interest either. "He looks an awful lot like Maxwell Ramsley. In fact, they could be twins, they look so much alike." Bethany looked at her father. "Did Mr. Ramsley have an affair?" Ted cleared his throat uncomfortably. "What a thing to ask!" "I'm sure it's just a coincidence." Constance tried to smooth the moment over. "They say everyone has a look-alike out there." "Why would you be talking to a detective?" frowned Ted. "He's going to help me look into some of my memories," Bethany said calmly. "I met him at the marina. He has been very helpful." "I'll bet he has," scowled Ted. "He probably knows money when he sees it. Bethany, you need to stop this. Let it go. I do not want you seeing this detective ever again. He is just going to try to scam you. Do I make myself clear?" He's trying to help. Bethany frowned at her father's resistance.
You're not seeing him again. End of discussion.
Ted put his napkin on his plate and stood.
There is nothing to be going to the police about. You are wasting their time. The only thing this detective is thinking of is trying to get money out of a confused little rich girl.
Bethany watched Ted leave the room. She set down her fork. She was not hungry anyways. I hear Earle has shares in oil companies. Constance smiled as she changed the subject. Bethany sighed and let her mother ramble on about Earle Milton's prospects. Soon enough, Constance would be setting Bethany up with the Miltons and their oil fortune. Bethany supposed it was better than a pretended relationship with a guy who seemed irritated by her very existence. Earle Milton was as boring as lint. He was slightly chubby, had a comb-over for his balding crown, and was otherwise nondescript. Bethany was used to the men in her life being confident and slightly condescending. They usually liked to talk about themselves and steer the tone of the evening. All Bethany generally had to do was look pretty and smile while gracing their arm while the man of the moment took care of the entire evening. Earle did not know how. He deferred everything to her. He had no confidence. He smiled in an over-eager, puppyish way. Earle constantly steered the conversation to her. He ordered what she ordered for dinner. He agreed with everything she said. Bethany had the feeling that their roles were a little reversed. It was discomforting. It did not help that his mother was at the benefit, watching Earle and Bethany's every move. Betty Milton was like a hawk waiting to see what sort of mouse Bethany was. No wonder Earle was weak. She should not think that way. Earle was perfectly nice. He was just far too nice. Bethany sighed. People were giving them pitying looks. It was hard to say who the pity was for. Bethany for saddling herself with Earle and Betty, or Earle for saddling himself with the known freak. Bethany knew what polite society called her behind her back. She was the one who was a little mentally deficient and odd. Everyone knew she was different. For years she had been on the fringes of high society, the girl who did not feel emotions, who was not quite the same, who did not have friends. Bethany had been tolerated because she was a Searson. "Would you like another coffee?" Earle asked her readily. "I'll summon the waiter if you wish." "No, thank you." Bethany gave him a wan smile. "I would rather not be awake all night." "They have decaf," he supplied. "I will get you one." Earle waved his hand around, and Bethany closed her eyes at the sight. Was this how it was going to be? Looking across the breakfast table at Earle Milton, fetching her coffee at the slightest provocation. She shuddered. Milton babies. Eager, chubby-faced cherubs all wanting to please someone. Bethany tried not to feel sick. It was not going to work out. She was not going to date Earle Milton. Usually, it was the guys dumping her, not the other way around. Bethany opened her eyes and allowed the waiter to pour her another cup of coffee as the silent auction continued. She was not going to drink it, but at least Earle felt better for having served her. She had an appointment with Dr. Ershman tomorrow. Maybe the psychiatrist would get a kick out of this. It was a little funny, Bethany supposed. "Do you like that particular piece of art?" asked Earle. He craned his neck over the crowd as a man showcased a painting. "I could put a bid in for you." "Thank you, but I really do not need anything." Bethany smiled to soften her response. She worried that Earle really would purchase the item for her. He seemed pathetically eager to please. Bethany could not help but compare him to Drew. She did not think the detective would ever find himself at a boring art benefit. He probably did not go to charity events at all. He seemed like the type who went to bars and watched the game. She'd never been to a bar. It was something she should put on her to-do list. Bethany had started a to-do list when she was dating Noah Ramsley. Noah had been a good friend. They had explored all sorts of new things, from curling, which neither of them was any good at, to her first hockey game. Bethany had enjoyed the new experiences. Eventually, she and Noah had just remained friends. Noah was now married to a lovely woman named Elle, and they had 5 boys. Noah had been in love with Elle the entire time that he had dated Bethany.
Bethany had been glad to help him by breaking up and allowing him to chase the woman that he really wanted, even if it had made her feel a little sad that she was not the object of his affections. She was not the object of anyone's affections. Bethany wanted to be loved with a yearning like Noah had for Elle. Bethany sighed and wondered if Earle would be offended if she checked the score of the Yankees game. She had become a fan since dating Noah, something she suspected her mother would not be impressed with. Bethany had the feeling Earle would not care. He would probably try to become a fan too, just because she was one. "Earle," Bethany tilted her head and looked at him, "what do you want to do?" Earle cleared his throat nervously. "What do you mean? What do you want to do?" "I'm asking you," gently said Bethany. "What do you want to do? Tonight, tomorrow, with the rest of your life? If you could do anything, what would you like to do?" Earle blinked and thought about it like it was a foreign concept. "I'm not sure what you mean." "You have money. You have your health," Bethany pointed out. "Have you always wanted to do something? Go somewhere? Be something? You're only limited by yourself." "I suppose I might." He took a breath and let it out. "What?" Bethany leaned in, curious about what was on Earle's mind. "I would move out of my mother's house." Earle clapped a hand over his mouth. "Do not say anything. I should not have said that." "Why not?" Bethany asked encouragingly. "If that is what you want, then you should do it." "My mother has been so good to me. She's the best, and I would hate to disappoint her," Earle whispered. "It's just that sometimes—" "Sometimes?" Bethany urged him. "I would like a little space. I think if I ever did manage to get married, Mother would expect her to move in with us." Earle's eyes got wide. "I'm not sure how that would go." "Not well," Bethany advised. "Do you want to move out tonight?" "What?" Earle was shocked. "You cannot be serious." "Why not?" She shrugged. "You have money. You could rent a moving company. Pay them extra, and I'm sure someone will do it tonight while your mother is at the benefit. All you need to do is find a place to live. Then I'm sure there are lots of places available on short notice for the right amount of money. Some of them might even be furnished." "Oh, no. I could not move out tonight." Earle shook his head resolutely. "Earle," Bethany put her hand over his in a sign of support, "I get the feeling that if you do not move out tonight, you never will." Earle looked at Bethany's hand covering his and took in a shaky breath. He looked into her eyes with wonder. "Can I move in with you?" Bethany snatched her hand back. "On second thought, maybe you should stay with your mother. She takes very good care of you." Earle nodded, a little disappointed, but not really surprised. "She does." Bethany looked around with boredom. "I am going to visit the little lady's room." "What you mean is you're going to leave while you can," Earle said morosely. Truthfully, Bethany just thought she would check the score of the game. However, if Earle was going to give Bethany an out, she would happily take it. "Yes, Earle. Have a good night." "Night." Earle sipped his coffee. He was used to getting dumped. Bethany gathered her purse and shawl, making her escape. If you enjoyed this chapter of Love and Lies, look for Chapter 6 on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell so that you get those lovely notifications that more chapters are coming. Happy listening!